Hey guys, tonight we slip into the dusty, sun-scorched hills of ancient Greece, where a cunning king named Sisyphus dares to thumb his nose at death itself. Picture yourself standing on a rocky outcrop, the air thick with olive scent and distant sea salt, watching a man with a glint in his eye weave plans sharper than a bronze blade. This isn't just a story, it's a plunge into eternal futility. A tale so heavy, you probably won't survive this without questioning your own daily grind. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're listening from as we dive into this myth. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in Corinth, a bustling trade hub perched between mountains and sea, where Sisyphus rules with a mind like a labyrinth. He's no ordinary king, his wits sharper than the spears his guards carry. Historical records, sparse as they are, peg him as a founder of the Isthmian Games, a real festival in ancient Greece, all sweat and glory to honour Poseidon. But the quirky whispers. They say Sisyphus once sold Corinth's spring water to a river god for a quick buck. Imagine bottling tap water and charging a deity for it. You smirk at his audacity, but it's this cleverness that sets him on a collision course with the gods. Historians still argue whether Sisyphus was a hero or a conman, his motives as murky as the Styx. You see him now pacing his palace, eyes darting like he's already plotting his first dodge around fate. He's not just a king, he's a man who loves life too much to let it slip away. You feel the warmth of his ambition, the pulse of someone who'd barter with eternity itself. The myths paint him as a trickster, born under a sky where Zeus' lightning cracks like a whip. His story begins with a spark of defiance, Sisyphus the mortal, who thinks he can outsmart the inevitable. You walk beside him through Corinth's dusty streets where merchants hawk figs and potters spin clay. Kids scamper laughing, unaware their king's about to pick a fight, with powers that crush mountains. You catch his glance sly and knowing, like he's already seen the endgame and decided to rewrite it. Why is he so bold? Maybe it's the sea breeze, whispering rebellion, or the weight of a crown that demands he prove his worth. Let's lean into that for a second. You're Sisyphus. Right, running a city, juggling alliances, keeping the gods appeased with sacrifices. Sounds like a Monday, doesn't it? Except his Monday lasts forever. There's a story half forgotten, that he once tricked a rival into drinking soured wine just to win a trade deal. Classic Sisyphus, always one step ahead until he steps on divine toes. You can almost hear the gods muttering their voices, like distant thunder, annoyed at this mortal who dares to play their game. You're standing at the edge of his world now, where ambition meets arrogance. The sun dips low, casting long shadows, and Sisyphus is already scheming against the one force no one escapes death. You feel a chill not from the evening air, but from knowing this man's about to roll the dice with eternity. You're still in Corinth, trailing Sisyphus through his city's sun-baked streets, where the air hums with the clatter of carts and the chatter of traders. His reputation as a clever ruler spreads like wildfire. Merchants whisper his name with a mix of awe and unease. You see him striding past his cloak, catching the breeze, exuding the kind of confidence that makes you wonder if he's ever lost a bet. Historically, Sisyphus is credited with making Corinth a trade powerhouse, its port buzzing with ships from across the Aegean. But there's a quirky tale half laughed about in tavern corners that he once convinced a rival city's envoy the moon was Corinth's property, sold it for a chest of silver. You chuckle imagining the envoy squinting skyward, duped. Historians still argue whether his cunning was genius or greed, his every move a puzzle with missing pieces. You follow him to the palace, its stone walls etched with stories of gods and heroes. Sisyphus doesn't just rule, he plays the game of power like a lyre, plucking strings no one else dares touch. You notice how his eyes scan every room, always calculating. The man's a walking strategy, his mind a maze where every path leads to his own survival. You're drawn to his charisma, the way he greets a potter with the same warmth as a noble, but there's a glint in his gaze that says he's always 3 moves ahead. It's like he's playing chess with fate and you're not sure if he's a knight or a pawn. Picture yourself at his side during a council meeting. Advisors drone about grain shortages, but Sisyphus leans back smirking like he's already solved it. He suggests rerouting trade ships to dodge pirates. Brilliant, yet so simple, you wonder why no one else thought of it. But there's a catch, his plans always serve him first. You catch a whisper from a servant about how Sisyphus once borrowed temple gold to fund a festival promising Zeus he'd pay it back. Spoiler, he didn't. You laugh softly, imagine stiffing the king of the gods like he's some local moneylender. That's Sisyphus, always skating on thin ice, grinning. Yet beneath the charm you sense a restlessness. He's not just ruling Corinth, he's wrestling with something bigger. You stand on his balcony overlooking the city's twinkling lights and feel his unease. The stars above seem to watch him, judgmental, like they know he's about to cross a line. His love for life burns too bright, he's not content to rule and die like mortals do. You hear him mutter about eternity, his voice low like he's bargaining with the night itself. It's not just ambition, it's obsession. You're starting to see why the gods might take notice, their patience fraying like an old rope. His cleverness isn't just for show, it's survival. You walk with him through a market where he haggles over olives like it's a battlefield. A vendor tries to cheat him, but Sisyphus flips the game, leaving with twice the goods for half the price. You're impressed, but there's a shadow in his wake. Every victory makes him bolder, every trick a step closer to divine radar. You can almost hear the fates snipping threads in the distance, their scissors glinting. Sisyphus doesn't see it yet, but you do. His brilliance is a beacon, and not all who watch are friendly. You leave the market, the weight of his choices settling on your shoulders, knowing he's about to roll the dice with powers that don't lose. You're at Sisyphus's side, the air sharp with the tang of salt from Corinth's harbour, where ships creak and gulls screech. He's plotting again, his eyes glinting like polished obsidian, fixed on a horizon where death itself looms. This is the moment he first dares to cheat the Reaper, and you're right there, heart pounding, as he weaves his boldest scheme yet. Historical texts like those from Pausanias confirm Corinth's king was famed for cunning, often bending rules mortals dared not touch. But there's a quirky rumour, some say he once tricked a soothsayer into reading fake omens to dodge a royal funeral. You stifle a laugh picturing him swapping sheep bones for prophecy. Historians still argue whether his defiance stemmed from love of life or sheer hubris, the line as blurry as mist over the Styx. You're in his private chambers now, oil lamps flickering, casting shadows that dance like spectres. Sisyphus paces, muttering about Thanatos, death's grim envoy, who comes for all mortals. He's heard the tales, Thanatos cloaked in darkness, snatching souls with a touch. But Sisyphus, he's not going quietly. You watch him scribble plans on a wax tablet, his fingers moving like they're unravelling fate itself. His first trick is simple, but daring he'll trap death, bind him like a thief, caught in the agora. You lean closer, catching his whispered scheme, to lure Thanatos with a feast, a trap, disguised as hospitality. It's so bold you almost cheer, but a chill runs through you. Gods don't take kindly to mortals, rewriting their rules. Picture the night it happens. You're outside his palace, stars blazing overhead, the air heavy with the scent of roasted lamb. Sisyphus invites Thanatos in, all smiles pouring wine, like they're old friends. You're nervous, glancing at the shadows, expecting divine wrath to crash down. He's planned every detail, chains, forged in secret, hidden under a rug. You marvel at his nerve, like he's pulling a prank on the cosmos. Here's a little joke for you. What do you call a mortal who traps death unemployed by morning? But Sisyphus pulls it off, and you're there as Thanatos, lulled by wine, steps into the trap. Chains clank, and death's caught. Imagine the look on his skull face, baffled. You feel the world shift to stillness where souls should be departing. No one dies that night. You wander Corinth's streets, noticing the sick, linger the wounded, cling to life. It's eerie, like the universe is holding its breath. Sisyphus grins, but you see the strain in his eyes. He knows this can't last. The gods are watching, their patience thinner than a spider's thread. You catch a glimpse of his wife Merope, her face pale, sensing trouble. She's his anchor, but even she can't tether him when he's this reckless. You're starting to feel the weight of his choices, like a stone you can't push away. His victory is fleeting, and you sense it. The air grows heavy, like Zeus himself is leaning in offended. Sisyphus has cheated death, but at what cost? You stand at his side, watching him bask in his triumph. But there's a knot in your gut. You know the gods play for keeps, and Sisyphus just raised the stakes. A stray dog howls in the distance, and you wonder if it's a warning. He's outsmarted Thanatos, but you can't shake the feeling that the next move belongs to the heavens, and they don't lose gracefully. You step back, the night air, cool, his laughter echoing as you brace for what's coming. You're standing in the shadow of Corinth's Acropolis, the air thick with tension, like the moment before a storm cracks the sky. Sisyphus has trapped Thanatos, and the world feels off kilter. No one's dying, and the gods are noticing. You sense Zeus's gaze, icy and unyielding, boring into Sisyphus from the heavens. Historical accounts like those in Homer's Iliad hint at Zeus as the ultimate enforcer, his will bending mortals and immortals alike. But there's a quirky tidbit. Some ancient poets claimed Sisyphus once bragged he could outwit Zeus's lightning by hiding in a bronze jar. You snort imagining him curled up like a pickled olive, dodging thunderbolts. Historians still argue whether his defiance was cleverness or madness, his motives as slippery as the eels in Corinth's markets. You follow Sisyphus through his palace, where the air hums with unease. He's still riding the high of caging death, but you notice his glances skyward, like he feels the weight of divine eyes. Zeus, perched on Olympus, isn't just a god, he's the cosmic referee, and Sisyphus just kicked dirt on his sandals. You picture Zeus' beard, bristling lightning bolt, twitching in his grip, as he learns a mortal has jammed the gears of fate. It's like Sisyphus hacked the underworld's Wi-Fi, and now the gods are lagging. You're almost impressed, but your gut twists. Nobody outsmarts the king of the gods without a receipt. You're there when whispers reach the palace, the gods are angry. You catch Sisyphus pacing, his usual smirk, faltering. He knows Zeus is watching, his divine radar locked on. The air feels charged like static before a strike. You imagine Zeus muttering, "This mortal thinks he's clever," probably while tossing a thunderbolt like a stress ball. Sisyphus, though, isn't cowering. You see him double down, plotting his next move, his mind a whirlwind of schemes. He's like a guy who jaywalks during a police chase and expects to stroll away. You can't help but admire the guts, even if it's a train wreck in slow motion. Step outside with him into the cool night where stars glint like divine spies. You hear priests muttering at the temple their prayers to Zeus louder than usual. Sisyphus ignores them, but you feel the pressure building like a kettle about to scream. He's crossed a line and the gods don't send warning letters. You recall a story from the Agora. Some say Zeus once turned a cheeky mortal into a stag for less. You chuckle softly, picturing Sisyphus dodging antlers, but the humour fades fast. The air grows heavier, and you sense the divine council stirring their voices like distant thunder rolling closer. You linger near Sisyphus as he stares at the horizon, his jaw set. He's not done yet, he's got another trick brewing, you can tell. But Zeus's gaze is relentless, a spotlight Sisyphus can't duck. You feel the inevitability, like sand slipping through your fingers. He's a man who loves life too much to bow, but you know the gods don't play fair. You step back, the night air, sharp his silhouette stark against the flickering torches. The game's still on, but the board's tilting, and you can't shake the feeling that Zeus is about to make his move. You're trailing Sisyphus through a dusty grove outside Corinth, where the air smells of pine and betrayal. His latest scheme has landed him in hot water, and you're about to see how he crossed a river god to save his own skin. Ancient texts like those from Apollodorus confirm Sisyphus' knack for making deals with deities, often at a steep cost. But there's a quirky whisper. Some say he once traded a sacred springs location for a herd of divine cattle, only to misplace half the herd. You grin, picturing him shrugging at a fuming god, like he forgot where he parked the cows. Historians still argue whether his deal with Asopus was pure cunning or a desperate gamble, his motives as tangled as the roots under your feet. You're at the riverbank now, where the waters of Asopus churn, glinting under a midday sun. Sisyphus stands tall, negotiating with the river god himself, whose form shimmers like liquid silver. The story goes that Zeus, in one of his less than charming moments, abducted Asopus' daughter Aegina. The river god's furious, his currents thrashing, demanding answers. Sisyphus, ever the opportunist, sees a chance. You watch him lean in, voice smooth as honey, offering to spill Zeus's secret, in exchange for a favour, a spring to water Corinth's dry fields. It's like trading gossip for a new irrigation system. You can't help but laugh. Only Sisyphus would barter with a god's family drama. The deal's done and you see the spring bubble up, a gift from Asopus. Corinth's fields will thrive, but you feel a prickle on your neck. Zeus doesn't like snitches. Sisyphus knows it too, his eyes darting to the sky where clouds gather like divine frowns. You're standing close enough to hear his quickened breath, but he's still smirking like he's outsmarted the universe again. You want to shake him, buddy. You just ratted out the king of the gods. It's like texting your boss's secrets to HR and expecting a raise. The air grows heavy, the river's murmur sounding like a warning. You walk with him back to the city, the new spring's water sparkling behind you. The people cheer, unaware their king just painted a target on his back. You notice Merope, his wife, watching from a distance, her face tight with worry. She senses the storm coming, even if Sisyphus pretends it's just a breeze. You recall a tale from the market. Some say Sisyphus cursed anyone who betrayed his trust, their luck drying up like a desert. You chuckle softly, imagining Sisyphus dodging bad omens like parking tickets. But the humour fades as you feel the weight of his choices, each one stacking like stones he'll soon have to push. You linger by the palace gates, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows. Sisyphus is still scheming, but you know Zeus' patience is thinner than a papyrus sheet. The river god's favour came at a price, and the gods don't forget debts. You see Sisyphus glance at the horizon, his defiance burning bright, but you can't shake the feeling that the next divine shoe is about to drop. The air hums with tension, and you step back, the weight of his betrayal settling like dust, knowing he's running out of tricks. You're back in Corinth, the air thick with the scent of olive oil and tension, as Sisyphus pushes his luck further by trapping Thanatos' death himself. You're right there, heart racing as he pulls off his wildest stunt yet. Ancient sources like the Homeric hymns mention gods like Thanatos as enforcers of fate, rarely outwitted by mortals. But there's a quirky tale. Some say Sisyphus once distracted Thanatos with a riddle contest, buying time to set his trap. You chuckle, imagining death scratching his bony head over a wordplay puzzle. Historians still argue whether Sisyphus's audacity was brilliance, or a death wish his motives, as elusive as shadows in a storm. You're inside the palace now, where lamplight flickers on stone walls casting eerie shapes. Sisyphus has invited Thanatos to a feast, his smile disarming, but his hands busy with hidden chains. You watch half amazed, half horrified, as he pours wine, chatting like their old tavern buddies. The trap's clever iron chains forged in secret, tucked under a woven rug. You can almost hear the gods gasping like Sisyphus just hacked their cosmic script. It's like locking your boss in the break room to skip a deadline. Bold, but oh, the fallout. You're close enough to see his smirk as Thanatos steps into the trap chains, snapping shut like a bear trap. Death's caught and you feel the world stutter. Step outside and the night feels wrong. No souls depart. The sick linger their breaths, rasping. You wander Corinth's streets where the air's too still, like the universe forgot its rhythm. Sisyphus back at the palace is grinning, but you catch the sweat on his brow. He knows this stunt's bigger than his river god deal. Remember that shiny new spring. This time he's not just snitching, he's holding death hostage. You laugh softly, picturing Hades checking his underworld inbox, confused why no one's clocking in. But the gods aren't laughing. You sense their anger, a low hum like distant thunder. You trail Sisyphus to his balcony, where he stares at the stars, defiant but tense. Merope hovers nearby her eyes, wide with fear. She knows the gods don't play fair. You recall a whisper from the Agora. Some say trapping Thanatos angered Ares, god of war, who loves a good battlefield harvest. You smile, imagining Ares sulking like a kid whose game got paused. But the humour fades as you feel the divine pressure building like a dam about to burst. Sisyphus has stopped the cycle of life, and you know, Zeus, still fuming from that Sisyphus betrayal, isn't about to let this slide. You stand in the cool night, the palace looming behind you, its torches flickering like warning signals. Sisyphus is still scheming, but you see the cracks in his confidence. He's chained death, but the chains binding him to the god's wrath are tightening. You feel the weight of his choices heavier than that spring he bargained for, and you know the next move isn't his. The stars seem to pulse judgmental, as if Zeus himself is glaring down, ready to end this mortal's game. You're slipping into the underworld's gloom, where shadows cling like damp moss, and the air tastes of ash and regret. Sisyphus, fresh off chaining Thanatos, has been dragged to Hades' realm, but he's not done defying fate. You're about to see his first escape, a slick plea to Persephone that bends the rules of the dead. Ancient texts like those from Hyginus note Persephone's role as underworld queen, sometimes swayed by mortal cunning. But there's a quirky rumour. Some say Sisyphus once sent a ghostly messenger to flatter Persephone, with poetry softening her before his pitch. You grin, picturing him workshopping rhymes in the afterlife. Historians still argue whether his escape was a masterstroke or a desperate bluff, his intentions as murky as the underworld's rivers. You're standing beside Sisyphus now, his shade flickering in the dim light of Hades' court. The underworld's no picnic, think cold stone distant whales, and a vibe like a DMV run by skeletons. Persephone sits on her throne, her gaze softer than Hades' scowl. Sisyphus, ever the charmer, spins his tale he wasn't buried properly, He claims no coins for Charon, no rights to honour his soul. You raise an eyebrow. Classic Sisyphus playing the victim like he's auditioning for a Greek tragedy. He begs to return to the living just to set things right with Merope. You're almost impressed. It's like convincing your boss you need a day off to organise your desk. Persephone hesitates, her fingers tracing the pomegranate seeds on her plate. You feel the tension knowing she's torn between pity and protocol. Sisyphus leans in, voice smooth as a lyre's hum, promising he'll be back in 3 days. You laugh softly. 3 days. That's like promising to return a library book on time. But Persephone buys it her nod, like a crack in the underworld's iron rules. You see Sisyphus's shade slip free, a smirk ghosting his lips as he heads back to Corinth's sunlit hills. The air shifts lighter, but you know this escapes a borrowed breath. You follow his shade to the surface where Corinth's olive trees sway under a golden sun. Merope's there, her face a mix of joy and dread, as Sisyphus reappears, flesh and blood again. You feel the warmth of their reunion, but it's tinged with unease, like hugging someone who's already got one foot in the grave. You recall that Sisyphus deal, how his betrayal of Zeus started this mess, and now he's doubled down by conning Persephone. The gods must be fuming, their patience thinner than a spider web. You chuckle imagining Hades checking his soul ledger, realising he's been played again. You linger in Corinth's marketplace where people whisper about their king's return, half awed, half scared. Sisyphus acts like nothing's happened, haggling over figs, like it's just another Tuesday. But you see the strain in his eyes, the way he glances at the sky expecting divine payback. The underworld's not a revolving door, and you know Persephone's leniency won't last. You feel the weight of his defiance heavier than that boulder waiting in his future, and you can't shake the sense that the gods are sharpening their claws, ready to drag him back. You're back in Corinth, the air warm with the scent of blooming jasmine, but there's a shadow over the city, as Sisyphus basks in his underworld escape. You're walking beside Merope, his wife whose heart carries the weight of his defiance. Her grief, raw and quiet, pulls you into the human cost of his schemes. Ancient sources like those in Ovid's Metamorphoses mention Merope as a Pleiad, a star-born nymph tied to Sisyphus's mortal ambition. But there's a quirky tidbit. Some say she wept so much, her tears formed a new stream in Corinth, dubbed Merope's Sorrow. You smile imagining locals dodging her puddles like they're cursed. Historians still argue whether her love for Sisyphus was his strength or his downfall, her role as hazy as dawn missing. As you're at their home now, a modest palace room where sunlight spills through a window. Merope's eyes are red, her hands twisting a woolen shawl as she watches Sisyphus laugh with advisors outside. He's back from the underworld, thanks to that smooth-talking plea to Persephone, remember that 3-day promise. But you see the toll on Merope. She's no fool. She knows his return's a stolen moment, like borrowing time from a god's hourglass. You feel her grief sharp as a blade, knowing he's cheated death but not the consequences. It's like watching someone bet their house on a rigged dice roll. Picture yourself sitting with her, the room quiet, except for the distant clink of Sisyphus's wine cup. She whispers about the nights she waited unsure if he'd ever return. You sense her love fierce but fraying as she grapples with his reckless heart. He's out there charming the court, but you're here feeling her fear that each laugh could be his last. You chuckle softly, thinking of Sisyphus, promising her just one more trick, like a kid swearing they'll only eat one more fig. Her grief isn't just for him, it's for the life they might have had if he'd played by the rules. You step outside where Sisyphus is regaling merchants with tales of his cunning. The crowd loves it, but you catch Merope's glance from the doorway, her eyes like storm clouds. She knows the gods are watching their patience worn thinner than that chain he used on Thanatos. You recall his deal with Asopus, the spring that cost him Zeus's trust, and now this slipping Persephone's grasp. The air feels heavy, like the gods are leaning in their whispers, coiling around Corinth. You laugh quietly, imagining Hades grumbling about mortal loopholes like a bureaucrat with a bad day. You linger by Merope, her silence louder than the marketplace din. She's the anchor he ignores, the one who'll pay for his defiance when the gods come knocking. You feel the weight of her sorrow heavier than the spring's waters or the underworld's chains. Sisyphus is alive, but you know it's temporary, like a sunset that lingers too long. The god's gaze is unrelenting, and Merope's grief is a warning, a quiet ache that says his tricks are running out. You step back the evening air, cool, her silhouette fading, as Sisyphus's laughter echoes oblivious to the storm brewing above. You're still in Corinth, the city's pulse quickening, as the god's patience frays like an old rope, under Sisyphus's relentless scheming. You feel the divine fury building a storm gathering in the heavens, ready to crash down on this king who's dodged death twice. Ancient texts like those in Hesiod's fragments describe the gods as enforcers of cosmic order, their wrath inevitable when mortals like Sisyphus push too far. But there's a quirky tale some say Zeus once sent a flock of crows to pester Sisyphus, as a warning only for him to shoo them off with a slingshot. You laugh picturing him swatting at divine messengers like they're pesky flies. Historians still argue whether his defiance was courage or arrogance, his heart as hard to pin down as a shadow in a gale. You're standing in the palace courtyard where Sisyphus drills his guards, his voice sharp, but his eyes darting skyward. He knows the gods are done with his tricks, first trapping Thanatos, then sweet-talking Persephone, not to mention that Sisyphus snitch job. You feel the air crackle like the moment before lightning splits a tree. The god's fury isn't just anger, it's a cosmic recalibration, and Sisyphus is the glitch they're itching to fix. You catch whispers from priests nearby their prayers, to Zeus louder, more desperate, like they're trying to appease a volcano. You smirk good luck with that, fellas. Sisyphus has a knack for making divine tempers flare. Picture yourself at his side as he paces his usual swagger, tinged with unease. He's not blind, he sees the omens, clouds twisting into shapes like angry faces, the wind carrying a low growl. You recall Merope's grief, her quiet fear in that sunlit room, and now you see it reflected in the city's mood. The people still cheer their king, but their laughter's hollow, like they sense the heavens tightening their grip. You chuckle softly, thinking of Sisyphus telling his council, "Relax, I've got this," like he's negotiating a grain deal, not a divine vendetta. But the gods aren't merchants you can haggle with. You wander to the city's edge, where the new spring Asopus gift glitters mockingly. It's a reminder of his first betrayal, the one that put him on Zeus' radar. Now with death freed and Persephone's leniency exposed, the gods are done playing. You feel their fury like a weight on your chest, heavier than the chain Sisyphus used on Thanatos. A stray dog barks and you wonder if it's Hermes, the god's messenger, sniffing around. You laugh quietly, imagining Sisyphus trying to bribe a divine dog with a bone classic move, but it won't work this time. The air grows colder, the stars dimming like they're turning their backs. You stand by the palace gates watching Sisyphus joke with a guard, his charisma a flickering flame. But you know the god's anger is a tide he can't outrun. Zeus, Hades, maybe even Persephone, they are all aligned now, their patience gone like dust in the wind. You feel the inevitability like a stone poised to roll. Sisyphus is still scheming, but you sense the endgame closing in the heavens, ready to drop their hammer. You step back the night air, sharp his laughter fading, as the god's fury looms undeniable and vast. You're in Corinth's bustling heart where the scent of fresh bread mixes with the tang of sea air, but the mood is tense as Sisyphus weaves his final, mortal deception. He's pushed the gods too far, trapping Thanatos, conning Persephone, betraying Zeus with that Sisyphus deal, and now you're watching his last desperate play to cling to life. Ancient sources like Pherecyde's fragments note Sisyphus' knack for bending fate. His scheme's legendary, even in his time. But there's a quirky whisper. Some say he hid a fake will in his palace, claiming he'd bribed Hades with a golden statue. You snicker, imagining him stashing a shiny decoy like it's a cosmic yard sale. Historians still argue whether this final trick was genius or panic his mind as slippery as the eels in Corinth's ports. You're trailing him through the palace, where torchlight casts long shadows mimicking the god's looming wrath. Sisyphus knows his borrowed time. Remember that 3-day promise to Persephone is running out. He's plotting to dodge the underworld again this time, with a lie so bold you almost admire it. He tells Merope to skip his burial rites, to leave his body unburied, no coins for Charon's ferry. It's a gamble. If he's not properly laid to rest, he can argue his way back to the living. You shake your head, chuckling, leave it to Sisyphus to turn his own funeral into a loophole. It's like ghosting your own obituary. Picture yourself in his chambers, where he whispers this plan to Merope. Her face is pale, her hands trembling, as she agrees, torn between love and dread. You feel the weight of her loyalty, heavier than the spring he won from Sisyphus. Sisyphus is calm, his voice low and smooth, like he's negotiating a trade deal, not his soul's fate. You catch his glance, that familiar glint of defiance, but there's a flicker of doubt. Does he know this is his last roll of the dice? You laugh softly, thinking of him telling Merope, "Don't worry, I've got one more trick," like he's pulling a prank on the fates. You step outside where the city hums, unaware their king's dancing on a knife's edge. The air feels charged like the gods are whispering in the wind. You recall the crow's Zeus warning swatted away. Like pests, and now the omens are louder, a cracked altar, a starless sky. The god's fury simmering since he chained Thanatos is ready to boil over. You smirk imagining Hades double-checking his soul roster, muttering, "Not this guy again." But Sisyphus keeps moving charming merchants, joking with guards, acting like he's untouchable. You know better the heavens are aligning their patience, gone like dust in a storm. You linger by the harbour watching waves crash, each one a reminder of the tide turning against him. Sisyphus's final deception is clever, but you feel the inevitability like a stone about to roll. He's betting on Merope's loyalty, on the god's oversight. But you sense Hermes' shadow nearby, the divine messenger ready to pounce. You stand the night air, sharp Sisyphus's laughter, echoing from the palace, but it's hollow now. His last trick is unravelling, and you know the gods are done playing his game. You're standing on Corinth's wind-swept cliffs, the sea below, churning like the god's rising wrath, as Sisyphus's final deception unravels. His plan to skip burial rites, banking on a loophole to dodge the underworld, is about to crash headlong into divine justice. You're there as Hermes, the swift-footed messenger, descends to drag him back to Hades. Ancient texts like those in Apollodorus's library confirm Hermes as the god's enforcer, his speed unmatched when fetching errant souls. But there's a quirky tale. Some say Sisyphus tried to bribe Hermes with a cask of Corinth's finest wine, only to get a divine eye roll. You chuckle, picturing him haggling with a god like he's at a market stall. Historians still argue whether Sisyphus's defiance was a calculated risk or blind bravado, his endgame, as unclear as fog over the Styx. You're in the palace now, where the air feels thick like the gods have sucked out the warmth. Sisyphus is laughing with advisors, but you notice his eyes flick to the shadows, sensing the noose tightening. Hermes appears not with fanfare, but a quiet menace, his winged sandals barely touching the floor. You feel a chill, imagine a divine process server, but with a smirk and a staff that hums with power. Sisyphus tries to talk his way out, his voice smooth as ever, spinning a tale about unfinished business. You laugh softly, it's like trying to charm a tax collector with a sob story. Hermes isn't buying it. His gaze is cold like the underworld's rivers. Picture yourself at Sisyphus's side, as Hermes grabs him, the air crackling with divine authority. Merope's nearby, her face crumpling. Remember her grief, that quiet ache in their sunlit room. She reaches out, but Hermes is relentless, pulling Sisyphus toward the underworld's maw. You feel the pull too, like gravity doubling as the world blurs and Corinth fades. The descent is swift, the air turning damp and heavy shadows swallowing the light. You recall his tricks, chaining Thanatos, conning Persephone, snitching to Asopus, and now they're a chain around his neck. You smirk, imagining Hades greeting him like, "Back so soon. Forgot your loyalty card." You're in the underworld now, where the air tastes of dust and despair. Hermes doesn't linger. His job's done leaving Sisyphus before Hades' throne. You see the king's defiance flicker, his usual swagger dimmed by the weight of divine judgment. The god's fury simmering since that river god deal is now a roaring flame. You stand in the shadows, feeling the cold seep into your bones as Hades leans forward, his voice like grinding stone. Sisyphus's last trick, skipping his burial, didn't work. The gods saw through it like cheap papyrus. You laugh quietly, picturing him thinking he could outrun Hermes, the guy who delivers Zeus' mail on time. You linger in the underworld's gloom, Sisyphus's silhouette stark against the flickering torches. His charm, his schemes, his love for life, they're useless now. You feel the finality heavier than Merope's sorrow, or that spring he bargained for. Hermes' justice is swift, and you know what's coming, a punishment to match his hubris. The air hums with the god's verdict, and you step back, the weight of his fate settling like ash, knowing Sisyphus's next stop is a hill he can't escape. You're deep in the underworld now, where the air is thick with the chill of eternity, and the faint wail of lost souls echoes off unseen walls. Sisyphus stands before Hades, his defiance dimmed but not gone as the gods unveil his eternal punishment, the boulder. You're right there, feeling the weight of his fate settle like a stone in your chest. Ancient texts, like those in Homer's Odyssey, describe Sisyphus's torment as a grim warning to mortals who defy divine will. But there's a quirky tidbit. Some say the boulder was carved with faint taunts like "Nice try, Sisyphus," etched by a snarky god. You chuckle, imagining him squinting at the insult mid-struggle. Historians still argue whether his punishment was pure cruelty or poetic justice, its meaning as debated as the underworld's depth. You see him now at the base of a steep, jagged hill, the boulder looming a massive, rough-hewn thing bigger than a Corinthian cart. Hades' voice, cold as river Styx, lays out the deal. Push it up, watch it roll down, repeat forever. You feel the absurdity, like being told to stack sand in a storm. Sisyphus grips the rock, his muscles straining, his jaw set like he's still got a trick up his sleeve. You're close enough to hear his grunt, smell the sweat as he heaves against the unyielding stone. It's like your worst day at work looped for eternity. Talk about a performance review from hell. Picture yourself beside him, the hill's slope mocking your every step. The boulder inches up dust, clouding the air, and you feel his stubborn hope, the same fire that outwitted Thanatos and charmed Persephone. But gravity's a divine enforcer, and just as he nears the top, bam, the rock slips crashing down with a thud that echoes like Zeus' laughter. You wince, knowing he'll start again. You laugh softly, thinking of him muttering, "Okay, best 2 out of infinity, but the gods aren't playing games anymore. This is their checkmate." You recall his tricks, snitching to Asopus, chaining death, dodging burial, and how they led here to this endless task. The underworld's gloom feels heavier than that spring he won, or Merop's grief, both now distant memories. You stand in the shadows, watching him push again, his hands raw, his breath ragged. The boulder's weight isn't just physical, it's the god's fury, their answer to his hubris. You smirk, imagining Hades betting Hermes on how many pushes it takes for Sisyphus to crack. But he doesn't, not yet. His eyes still burn defiant even as the rock rolls back. You linger on the hill, the air cold and stale, the boulders rumble, a constant reminder of his fate. Sisyphus doesn't speak, but you feel his resolve, a flicker of the man who thought he could outsmart eternity. The god's verdict is final, but you sense he's still searching for a loophole even here. You step back, the weight of his punishment heavier than the stone itself, knowing this hill is his world now, and the gods are watching, satisfied at last. You're still in the underworld's oppressive gloom, the air heavy with the scent of damp stone and despair, as you watch Sisyphus grapple with his boulder on that cursed hill. The reality of his punishment sinks in its relentless futility, grinding away at hope like sandpaper on bone. Ancient sources like Pausanias' description of Greece confirms Sisyphus' myth as a cautionary tale, his eternal task a symbol of divine retribution. But there's a quirky whisper, some say the hill's slope shifts slightly each time, just to mess with him, a cruel trick by a bored underworld demon. You snicker, picturing Sisyphus cursing the ground like it's a rigged carnival game. Historians still argue whether his punishment was meant to break his spirit or merely mock his ambition, its purpose, as slippery as the Styx's banks. You're at his side now, the hill's jagged rocks cutting into your senses as he pushes the boulder again. The stone's weight is brutal, its surface rough against his calloused hands, and you feel the strain in your own muscles, like you're sharing his burden. Each step is a battle dust, stinging your eyes, the incline stealing your breath. He's close to the top, sweat dripping, and you catch a flicker of hope in his eyes, maybe this time, but the boulder slips tumbling down with a mocking rumble. You groan, feeling the gut punch of failure. It's like chasing a Wi-Fi signal that drops every time you connect. Picture yourself trudging beside him, the hill's monotony crushing your spirit. The underworld's light never changes, a grey haze that makes time feel like a lie. You recall his defiance, tricking Thanatos, charming Persephone, even that Alcipus deal, and how it led to this endless loop. The boulder's not just a rock, it's every choice he made, every god he crossed rolled into one unyielding mass. You laugh softly, imagining him whispering to the boulder, "Come on, buddy, stay put this time." But it never does, and you sense the gods watching their satisfaction, colder than Hades' throne. You stand at the hill's base, watching him start again, his shoulders hunched but unbowed. The air's thick, the silence broken only by the boulder's scrape and his ragged breaths. You feel the futility, heavier than Merop's grief, or that spring he won, now a distant taunt. The god's design is clear, no escape. No victory, just the grind. You smirk, thinking of Sisyphus, trying to negotiate with the hill itself like it's a stubborn merchant. But the hill doesn't bargain, and neither do the gods. His punishment is a mirror reflecting his hubris back at him forever. You linger in the shadows, the boulders rumble, a heartbeat in the underworld's chest. Sisyphus pushes on his defiance, a faint ember, but you know the hill's reality is relentless. It's not just a task, it's a sentence, etched in stone and sweat. You step back, the air cold, his struggle a loop you can't unsee, knowing the gods have crafted a prison he can't outwit. You're still trapped in the underworld's dim haze, where the air feels like a cold, damp cloth pressed against your skin, and Sisyphus's endless struggle with the boulder consumes every moment. You're diving into his mind now, probing the thoughts of a man condemned to eternal futility, his defiance flickering like a candle in a storm. Ancient texts, like those in Pindar's odes, hint at Sisyphus's unyielding spirit, a mortal who challenged the gods and paid the price. But there's a quirky tale, some say. He once tried to carve a motivational slogan into the boulder, only for it to vanish by morning. You chuckle picturing him chiselling, "Keep pushing," like it's an ancient self-help poster. Historians still argue whether his mindset was stubborn pride or a spark of resilience, his inner world, as complex as the labyrinth he once navigated in Corinth. You're right there close enough to see the sweat bead on his brow as he leans into the boulder, the hill's slope mocking his every step. What's he thinking? You sense a whirlwind anger at the gods' regret for Merope's grief, maybe even a grudging respect for their cruel ingenuity. His mind's a battlefield where memories of Corinth's sunlit streets clash with the underworld's grey monotony. You feel his defiance, the same fire that outsmarted Thanatos and sweet-talked Persephone, now burning low but not out. It's like he's staring down the hill thinking, "You're tough, but I'm tougher." You laugh softly. Imagine trash-talking a rock for eternity. Picture yourself inside his head where thoughts loop like the boulder's path. He's replaying his tricks, snitching to Asopus, chaining death, dodging burial, and wondering if he'd do it again. You catch a flicker of pride. He outwitted gods after all. But there's pain too sharp as the rocks underfoot for Merope left alone in Corinth. You recall her tear-streaked face, the weight of her loyalty heavier than this stone. His mind churns. Is this punishment fair? Did he push too far? You smirk, imagining him debating the gods in his head like he's at a divine customer service desk demanding a refund on eternity. The hill's grind never stops, and neither do his thoughts. You feel the weight of his resolve fraying but unbroken. As he pushes again, the boulders rumble a taunt. The god's design. Remember, Zeus's icy gaze is meant to crush his spirit, but you sense he's still searching for meaning even here. You laugh quietly, picturing him mentally drafting a complaint letter to Hades, dear lord of the underworld. Your hill needs better signage. But the humour fades as you feel his isolation, the endless cycle wearing at his soul like wind on stone. You linger in the underworld's shadows, the boulders scrape a constant pulse. Sisyphus's mind is a maze, his defiance and doubt intertwined, each push a silent rebellion. You know the gods are watching, expecting him to break, but he's still holding on his thoughts, a spark in the gloom. You step back, the air cold and heavy, his struggle a mirror of his unyielding will, knowing this hill is as much a mental cage as a physical one. You're still in the underworld's suffocating gloom, where the boulders rumble echoes like a heartbeat, and Sisyphus's endless push grinds on. Now you're stepping back to ponder his myth through the lens of ancient philosophers, their debates casting new shadows on his eternal struggle. Ancient sources like Plato's dialogues often use myths like Sisyphus to wrestle with questions of justice and human will. But there's a quirky tidbit: some Stoics claimed Sisyphus whispered maxims to himself like "control what you can only to curse" when the boulder rolled back. You chuckle, imagining him as the world's grumpiest motivational speaker. Historians still argue whether his story was a warning against hubris or a meditation on resilience. Its meaning is debated as the stars above Corinth. You're standing on the hill, watching Sisyphus strain his muscles taut the rock, unyielding. Philosophers like Socrates might have seen him as a fool, defying divine order for fleeting glory. You feel their questions swirl. Is Sisyphus's rebellion noble or reckless? Does his struggle prove human spirit or human folly? You picture Plato scribbling in Athens, arguing Sisyphus's punishment fits his crime, challenging Zeus Thanatos, Persephone even that Asopus deal. Yet others like the cynics might admire his defiance, cheering him for spitting in fate's eye. You laugh softly, imagining Diogenes clapping from the sidelines, shouting, "Keep pushing, you madman." Lean into this, you're in a dusty agora of thought where philosophers bicker over Sisyphus's soul. Some say his task mirrors life's endless toils, think taxes, deadlines, or that inbox you'll never clear. You feel their point. The boulder's weight is like every goal that slips away, just as you reach it. Others argue he's a cautionary tale, his hubris remember, that chained Thanatos a lesson in respecting cosmic rules. You smirk, picturing a philosopher tripping over his robe while preaching. Accept fate as Sisyphus grunts past unbowed. The debate's alive, each push of the boulder a question mark in their scrolls. You linger on the hill, the air heavy with dust and doubt. Sisyphus doesn't hear these debates, but you sense his struggle fuels them. His defiance, his pain, Merope's grief that spring from Asopus, all weave into the philosopher's words. You recall their endless arguments like a tavern brawl with no winner. Is he a hero for pushing on, or a fool for not surrendering? You laugh quietly, imagining Sisyphus, overhearing muttering, "Call me what you want, just don't touch my rock." The underworld silence presses in, but the philosopher's voices echo their ideas as relentless as his task. You step back, the boulders rumble, a constant pulse. Sisyphus's myth is a mirror reflecting ancient questions about purpose and punishment. You feel the weight of their debates heavier than the stone itself, and know his story will fuel arguments long after Corinth's dust settles. The gods watch silent as his struggle becomes a puzzle for mortal minds, its meaning, as endless as the hill he climbs. You're still in the underworld's grey haze, where Sisyphus's boulder rumbles like a taunt, and his eternal push grinds on under the god's cold gaze. Now you're stepping into the 20th century, where Albert Camus, the French philosopher, recasts Sisyphus as an absurd hero, a symbol of defiance in a meaningless world. Ancient myths, as noted in works like Apollodorus, provided raw material for thinkers like Camus, who saw Sisyphus's struggle as a mirror for human existence. But there's a quirky tidbit. Camus allegedly scribbled early notes for his essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, in a cafe, joking that his coffee was as endless as Sisyphus's task. You chuckle, picturing him sipping espresso, muttering, "One must imagine Sisyphus caffeinated." Historians still argue whether Camus' take glorifies rebellion or masks despair, his lens as divisive as a Corinthian council debate. You're back on the hill, watching Sisyphus heave the boulder, its weight a metaphor Camus would love. He argued life's absurd, no grand meaning, just tasks like this rock rolling back every time. Yet Sisyphus is his hero, embracing the struggle without hope of victory. You feel the weight of that idea, like pushing your own boulder of daily grind bills, emails, or that sink full of dishes. Camus says Sisyphus finds freedom in accepting the absurdity, his defiance a quiet screw you to the gods. You laugh softly, imagining Sisyphus winking at you like, "No summit, no problem." Picture yourself sitting with Camus' book, its pages open as you watch Sisyphus strain. He writes, "One must imagine Sisyphus happy," and you pause. Happy? This guy's sweating and cursing with Merope's grief, and that Asopus spring a distant memory. Camus argues his rebellion, his refusal to quit, makes him free. You feel the paradox, like chasing a dream you know won't stick. You recall Sisyphus' tricks, chaining Thanatos, conning Persephone, and see why Camus loves him. He's the guy who flips off fate and keeps going. You smirk, picturing Camus cheering, "Push it, king," like a fan at a chariot race. But it's not all cheers. You sense the tension in Camus' view. Sisyphus's happiness feels like a hard-won defiance, not a picnic. The hills slope, the boulders slip mirror, life's pointless loops, and you feel the exhaustion. Is he really free, or just trapped in a mindset? You laugh quietly, imagining Sisyphus muttering, "Absurd hero, tell that to my backache." The underworld's gloom presses in, but Camus' lens makes you see Sisyphus anew, not just a punished king, but a symbol of grit spitting in the face of eternity's indifference. You linger on the hill, the boulders rumble, a steady pulse. Camus' idea sticks heavy as the rock itself, Sisyphus, as the guy who says yes to a no-win game. You feel the weight of his defiance tied to his old schemes, and the god's wrath now a spark for modern minds. You step back, the air cold, his struggle a canvas for Camus' absurd hope, knowing this hill holds more than stone. It holds a question about what keeps us pushing. You're still in the underworld's dim, oppressive haze, where Sisyphus's boulder grinds against the hill, its rumble a constant echo of his eternal task. Now you're stepping into the modern world, connecting his struggle to the relentless grind of today's life, where futility feels all too familiar. Ancient myths, as seen in texts like Hyginus, Fabulae, framed Sisyphus as a warning, but his story resonates with anyone stuck in a loop of pointless tasks. There's a quirky tidbit: some bloggers claim Sisyphus would have thrived as a corporate middle manager, forever pushing memos up a chain of command. You chuckle, picturing him in a tie, cursing a spreadsheet that crashes every time. Historians still argue whether his myth mirrors universal human struggles, Or just his own hubris, its relevance as open as a Reddit thread? You're back on the hill watching Sisyphus strain his sweat glistening in the underworld's half-light. His task feels like your own grind, think endless emails, soul-sucking meetings, or that to-do list that never shrinks. You feel the weight like pushing a shopping cart with a wonky wheel through life's aisles. Sisyphus's boulder is every deadline you hit, just to see another loom every goal that slips away. You recall his tricks snitching to Asopus, chaining Thanatos, dodging Persephone, and see them in modern hustles, gaming the system, cutting corners, chasing wins that don't last. You laugh softly, imagining him as a gig worker rated 5 stars for eternal effort, 0 results. Picture yourself scrolling through life where Sisyphus's hill is your daily slog. Social media feeds 9 to 5s, even that gym routine you swear you'll stick to. It's all boulders rolling back when you're almost there. You feel his defiance, the same spark that fueled his schemes in people grinding through dead-end jobs, or chasing dreams that feel rigged. Camus called him happy, but you wonder, is it happiness or just stubbornness? You smirk, picturing Sisyphus muttering, "At least I'm not in a Zoom meeting." His struggle's ancient, but it's your alarm clock, your inbox, your hustle, all looped in a cycle that doesn't quit. You stand by the hill, the air heavy with dust and echoes. Sisyphus' punishment born from Zeus's wrath, and Merope's grief feels like a mirror for today's world, where effort often outpaces reward. You sense the god's design crushing his spirit, but also his refusal to break a nod to anyone pushing through life's absurdity. You laugh quietly, imagining him as a meme when you finish one task and 3 more appear. The underworld's gloom presses in, but his struggle lights a spark. Maybe futility's not the end, but the fight itself. You linger in the shadows, the boulders rumble, a pulse tying his myth to your world. Sisyphus's defiance. His endless push feels like every time you keep going, despite the odds. You step back, the air cold, his struggle. A bridge between ancient hills and modern grinds, knowing his story asks you to find meaning in the roll, not the summit. You're still in the underworld's stifling gloom, where Sisyphus's boulder grinds against the hill, its endless rumble a grim soundtrack to his punishment. Now you're unravelling the murky origins of his myth, tracing its roots through ancient Greece's tangled web of stories and beliefs. Ancient sources like Hesiod's works and days show myths evolving through oral tradition shaped by poets and priests to teach or warn. But there's a quirky tidbit. Some say Sisyphus's tale began as a sailor's yarn, his boulder inspired by a ship's anchor that kept slipping in stormy seas. You chuckle, picturing grizzled mariners spinning tales of a cursed king while dodging waves. Historians still argue whether his story was born from moral lessons or local folklore, its origins as elusive as mist over Corinth's harbour. You're standing in the underworld, but your mind drifts to ancient Greece, where storytellers gathered in torchlit groves weaving Sisyphus's tale. Was he a real king, exaggerated into myth, or a cautionary figure crafted to scare mortals straight? You feel the weight of centuries, each retelling, adding layers his tricks with Asopus, Thanatos, Persephone all piling onto the boulder he now pushes. The myth's roots might lie in Corinth's trade rivalries, where cunning kings were both heroes and villains. You imagine a bard strumming a lyre, warning of hubris, while listeners nod, thinking of their own sly deals. You laugh softly. Sounds like a TED talk for toga wearers. Picture yourself sifting through fragments of old scrolls where poets like Homer or Pindar drop Sisyphus's name. His story shifts with each teller. Sometimes he's a rogue, sometimes a tragic figure. You sense the cultural currents. Greeks loved their tricksters, but feared divine payback. The boulder, that brutal punishment, might have been a priest's invention to keep folks in line, like a cosmic "don't cheat the gods" sign. You smirk, imagining Sisyphus as the poster child for "don't try this at home." His defiance, remember Merope's grief that spring from Asopus, feels like a spark from real human struggles moulded into myth. You linger in the underworld, the boulder's scrape pulling you back. The myth's origins are murky, but its power lies in its flexibility, a story that bends to fit any era's fears or hopes. You feel the gods' presence, their wrath shaping the tale as much as human voices. You laugh quietly, picturing a Greek kid hearing this story and vowing never to haggle with a river god. The air's heavy, the hills slope unchanging, but Sisyphus's myth feels alive, its roots tangled in truths about ambition and consequence. You step back, the underworld's chill seeping in the boulder's rumble, a link to those ancient bards. Sisyphus's story, born from whispers and warnings, carries the weight of his choices, tricking death, defying Zeus, and asks what stories we tell ourselves to keep pushing. You know the gods crafted his punishment, but humans crafted his myth, and it's as enduring as the hill he climbs. You're still in the underworld's cold grey haze, where Sisyphus's boulder grinds against the hill, its relentless rumble a backdrop to his eternal toil. Now you're stepping into the world of art, where his struggle has been captured in paintstone, and verse immortalising his torment across centuries. Ancient sources like vase paintings from the 5th century BCE show Sisyphus as a muscular figure straining against his rock, a symbol of human defiance. But there's a quirky tidbit: some Renaissance artists slip tiny skulls into their Sisyphus paintings, a cheeky nod to his failed death dodge. You chuckle picturing a painter smirking as he hides a grim Easter egg. Historians still argue whether these artworks glorify his rebellion or mourn his futility, their meaning as layered as the dust on his hill. You're standing before a canvas. Now maybe Titian's 1548, Sisyphus, where the king's muscles ripple, his face twisted in effort under a stormy sky. You feel the artist's brushstrokes, each one heavy with the weight of his task. Remember that Sisyphus deal or chaining Thanatos. The painting's not just a scene, it's a question about struggle itself. You see Sisyphus in sculptures too, like those in Greek temples, his body carved in marble, forever frozen mid-push. It's like the artist saw his story tricking Persephone, defying Zeus, and made it a mirror for every soul, wrestling with impossible odds. You laugh softly, imagining a sculptor muttering, "Hold still, Sisyphus, eternity's a long pose." Picture yourself in a gallery where Sisyphus appears in modern art, abstract streaks of red and black, or a digital piece where his boulder loops like a GIF. Each work captures his defiance, his pain, even Merup's distant grief, tying his myth to human resilience. You feel the pull of these images, their colours and shapes echoing the hill's grind. Poets too have claimed him. Think Rilke, weaving Sisyphus into verses about endless striving. You smirk picturing a poet scribbling by candlelight, comparing Sisyphus to a barista grinding through a double shift. Art makes his struggle timeless, a canvas for every era's frustrations. You linger on the hill, the boulders scrape blending with the hum of imagined galleries. These artworks, from ancient vases to modern prints, carry the god's wrath and Sisyphus's fire, making his story a shared human ache. You laugh quietly, imagining him peeking at a painting and grumbling, "They got my nose wrong." The underworld's gloom presses in, but art's embrace lifts his myth beyond the hill, turning his punishment into a universal cry, "Push on," even when it rolls back. You step back, the air cold, the boulders rumble, tying Sisyphus to every brushstroke and chisel mark. His story, born from divine fury, lives in art's endless gaze, asking you to find beauty in the struggle, not the summit. You know the gods meant to crush him, but artists made him eternal, his hill a canvas for defiance. You're still in the underworld's dim, heavy air, where Sisyphus's boulder grinds against the hill, its rumble a constant pulse, tying his story to eternity. Now you're reflecting on his legacy, unravelling the lessons woven into his endless task, and what it means for you standing in the shadow of his myth. Ancient texts like those in Ovid's Metamorphoses frame Sisyphus as a symbol of human ambition, pushed too far, a warning etched in stone. But there's a quirky tidbit: some say Greek kids used Sisyphus as slang for pointless chores like sweeping a dusty porch in a storm. You chuckle, imagining a kid muttering, "This is so Sisyphus," while hauling water. Historians still argue whether his tale teaches submission to fate or defiance in futility. Its lessons as open as the sky above Corinth. You're on the hill watching Sisyphus push his muscles, straining his eyes, burning with that same fire that outwitted Thanatos and charmed Persephone. His legacy isn't just punishment, it's a question why keep going when the boulder always rolls back. You feel it resonate. Think of your own struggles, the deadlines, the dreams that slip away. His story, born from tricks like snitching to a soapus or dodging burial mirrors. Every time you fight for something that feels just out of reach, you laugh softly, picturing Sisyphus as your co-worker griping, "Another day, another roll." His defiance despite Zeus' wrath or Merup's grief is a spark that lights up the human condition. Picture yourself sitting by the hill, the underworld's gloom softening as you think. Sisyphus's legacy isn't victory, it's persistence. He's the guy who keeps pushing, knowing the summit's a lie, and maybe that's the point. You see his story in every artist's canvas, every philosopher's debate, from Camus' absurd hero to ancient bards' warnings. It's like life saying, keep going even when it's absurd. You smirk imagining him giving you a nod, like welcome to the club, pal. His hill is your grind, his boulder your burdens, and his refusal to quit a quiet lesson in grit. You linger the boulder's rumble, fading into a distant hum. His legacy, defiance, futility, resilience, ties his ancient tricks to your modern struggles. You feel the god's design meant to crush him, but also the human spark that keeps him pushing a mirror for your own stubborn heart. You laugh quietly, thinking of him as the ultimate underdog, forever rolling against the odds. As the underworld's shadows soften, you feel the hill's weight ease like a breath held too long. The boulder's rumble grows distant, a gentle hum now blending with the quiet of your own thoughts. Sisyphus is still there pushing, but his struggle feels less like a curse, more like a whisper of persistence. You're safe tucked in your world where hills are smaller burdens, lighter. Let his story settle a soft echo in your mind as you drift toward rest. The god's wrath. Merope's tears the spring from Sisyphus. They fade into a calm horizon. Close your eyes, let the air cool, and carry his defiance into your dreams where every push is a step forward, even if it rolls back. Sweet dreams.